Hello Lunicorns, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about startup fundraising. All right, startup fundraising is quite an enigma because I want you to know that there are several routes of fundraising available to you at different stages of your business. Now, I want to take you through the full cycle of a startup's journey. How long do you think a startup takes to sell? And what I mean by that is the holy grail of building a company is to exit, right? The global average, and it's industry dependent, on average takes you about 8 years to sell your business, on average. Some companies like Square sold after 4 years, and other companies like Sonos took 16 years before they IPO'd and reached an exit. And an exit is basically a liquidation event. It's the time when you sell your shares in the company and you actually make that big payoff, that big payout. Investors will be very happy. You'll be very happy. It's the golden nugget that you're working so hard to get if you're financially driven. Some people just want to build a business, pay themselves a dividend for the rest of their life. That's more of a lifestyle business, right? But if you're going to raise money, which is what I'm going to talk to you about in this one, people are going to want to see an exit. How are they going to get the return on their investment, ROI? Before we start, hold up, stop what you're doing. I need you to understand one thing. And that one very important thing is the 7-8 years that it's going to take before you have this liquidation event, you sell your company. You, on average, the global average, are going to go through 5 rounds of funding. If you're not trying to build a company organically and take loans and things like that, you're going to have 5 events where you're going to give shares away for money, hopefully at a growing valuation. And in that time, you need to understand how much equity you're going to give away at each of those 5 stages. So you as a founder or a group of founders need to know what is on the table for you at the end of the journey, right? So that's very important. The startup fundraising cycle is something quite unique to this industry because in this industry, you'll typically go through 5 rounds of funding before you sell your business. And in each round of funding, you're going to bring in a different type of investor. So you need to be mindful about what you give away in terms of equity and valuation, as well as the terms attached to the shares in the company. Because when you sell shares, people get rights to voting, rights to board seats, and things like that. But I want to give you a better understanding of the types of fundraising that is available to you at each of the stages. In the early stages of startup, when you're starting this business, where do you think you can get money from? You might think you're going to take it from your savings. The classic example is doing a bootstrapping in the early stages. And what that means is basically you're going to self-fund a startup, whether it's you haven't quit your job yet, you're going to put a percentage of your own income there. Maybe you start the company and you do a lot of consulting at the beginning. A lot of startups I see do this. They consult at the beginning to get their company off the ground. But be careful because I've also seen companies get stuck in that cycle because it's good money and you get distracted away from what you're trying to do as the core business and then you might never even come back to it. And that's bootstrapping phase. The next area that you as an entrepreneur, as a business owner can get some funding into your business from is the FFF. Now what I mean by FFF is friends, families, and fools. This is when you ask a family member, a friend you know, a rich aunt or uncle, maybe even parent, to help you fund your business in the early phases. And this funding should go into product development because you want to capitalize that money into the business and build IP because money in should create value, right? So that when you raise money again, you're building on that value. And the reason it's called FFF, Friends, Family, and Fools, is because it's at the highest risk phase of the business. You haven't proven anything. You maybe have done the research to understand there's an opportunity here. You might not have the perfect team. You don't really have enough money to get it to a kind of marketable state. It's a very risky phase. Be careful not to give away too much equity at this phase because remember, the startup fundraising cycle, you're going to give away equity 5+ times during the lifetime of your business. So if you start out by giving away too much equity, you're going to end with a lot less because each round you get diluted more. So bear that in mind. Don't give too much equity away to friends, family, and fools. And also try to be careful about those fools because you often have first-time investors, angels we call them. But if it's a first-time angel, they're looking to learn as much as you are. So they're probably going to lose money on the first few investments because they might not have a lot to offer in terms of experience. So be mindful of who you take money from at the beginning. Family are great, but they might not add anything in terms of value. They might just want to support you. It's good money, but be careful. Don't take anything that anyone can't lose. Be mindful of that. The next one is, of course, banks and loans. Now, mostly, unless you have a business that has got a lot of property or equipment or you're selling kind of an inventory, you won't really be able to get a bank loan. And I wouldn't necessarily advise on this too much unless you're doing a sort of very much offline business, just because the bank loans mean that you're liable. You're the one who has to put down collateral. You might have to put your house up, you have to remortgage your house. A lot of people do this for businesses that are on more retail based, like on the high street. That works well for them because they know they have revenue coming in. They have cash flow which they can actually go to the bank with. But mostly in startups, the early phases, banks won't look at your forecast revenue as real, and they won't give you a loan based on that. So this is something that's usually reserved for businesses that have tangible assets. The next one is soft funding. Now, soft funding is all often too forgotten, because if you're in specific industries such as healthcare industries or in the medical industry, there's a lot of grant funding available at the moment. The EU had one called Horizon 2020. Now it's 2020 when I'm making this video, so it might be gone when you're watching this, but I'm sure they'll issue some new funding. But they issued a huge pool of money, I think it was like $1 billion or more, that was going to be issued to companies in specific spaces, a lot in healthcare. It was grant funding. So soft funding is free money, usually issued by a government, in some rare cases issued by a corporate who's trying to get some strategic value out of a development in a specific area. But for the most part, it's free money. It comes with a few hurdles you have to tick through. It's not just given to anyone. But in Norway, for example, they have Innovation Norway. In the UK, they have this UK funding. You know what? I'm going to put a link below in the comments with a few links to some UK, US, and European soft funding agencies. If you come from a different country, which I haven't covered, hit me a comment below and I'll be happy to try and provide you with areas that you can maybe get some soft funding from. So that's soft funding. Free money, don't give away any equity. You might have to write an application, which takes a bit of time because it's government at the end of the day, but it's very valuable to you because it's free money. Next phase, crowdfunding. Now, crowdfunding comes in different ways. Crowdfunding can be both equity crowdfunding, where you basically allow thousands of people to invest a few dollars in your company, and thousands of people with a few dollars makes thousands, 10,000s, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're not going to add a huge amount of value other than that small amount of money. But the cool thing about equity crowdfunding is to bear in mind that when you raise a round of funding normally and you bring in 5 to 15 investors, that's 5 to 15 people who become advocates of your business. They all go and tell their friends, oh, I just invested in this company, it's great. Now, if you do a crowdfunding, an equity crowdfunding, that's hundreds or thousands of people who might be like talking about your product at dinner parties, at events. That's actually quite powerful in itself. So bear in mind, equity crowdfunding can be a good thing, but also bear in mind, you're not going to get anything back other than maybe that word of mouth and brand value from other people, basically. The other aspect of crowdfunding is product crowdfunding. You may have heard of this from companies like Kickstarter and Indiegogo. These are companies that basically allow you to put a product on there that might be very basic, an MVP. It might even be alpha, like not even prototyped yet. You make a swanky video and you set a target of, like, say, we're going to raise $50,000. You might not have actually developed the product yet, because if you're going to build a product, and hardware typically is quite hard, famously, because you have to build molds to make products, which cost tens of thousands of dollars at the beginning. But if you do a crowdfunding campaign through Indiegogo, through Kickstarter, people will pre-buy your product. It's pre-sales, basically. So they say, hey, here's $100 for the price of your product. You maybe give them a discount or do it just over cost. And then you go and take that money and produce the products. And then they get mailed them, a month, a week, a year later in some cases, maybe even never in some cases, of buying that product. So that's crowdfunding, a great source if you're in the hardware space. A little bit harder if you're in software, you're doing a product that's purely online. So bear that in mind. Now, another source of funding is one that people don't really look as a source of funding, is incubators or accelerators. Now, these are basically school programs, if you will, for founders and startups in the early phases. Incubators are obviously usually before accelerators. They might incubate an idea, like you put an egg in an incubator and it hatches an egg. Think of that as an idea. You might put someone into an environment where they're exposed to industry knowledge, expertise, mentors, advisors, and they might have the willpower to create something great. But accelerators, incubators don't usually pay you, by the way, but accelerators often do. I've been through an accelerator, the Next Media Accelerator in Hamburg, Germany. It was a great accelerator for media companies in the new media space. But there are accelerators all around the world. Not all give you money, but a lot do. So the typical accelerator model in the US from a company called Y Combinator, which is the most famous accelerator, sort of the Harvard Business School of accelerators globally, also one of the oldest, set up by Sam Altman and a few other key individuals there. It's basically a 3 to 6 month program where they give you accelerated learning. And accelerated learning is, depending on the business, of course, and industry, but it can be product growth, it can be sales, trying to get you to meet partners, help you in that journey, advise you on refining your pitch. And at the end of the program, you would pitch to investors. But at the beginning of the program, more often than not, they'll give you an investment of anything from $10,000 to $150,000, even more in some cases. But they will take equity because this is an investment. It's not a grant funding. It's not soft funding. But for the most part, if a business is in the right phase, the sweet spot phase, this can be really valuable. But bear in mind, if you're at too late stage, maybe you don't need the help and support, and maybe your company's valuation's higher, because typically they will take on average 5 to 10% of the business for the investment that they make, and that investment can be 10,000 to 150,000 plus. That's an accelerator, a great way of getting some funding and also learning. So, it's smart money in a way. The next one, of course, is angels. Now, you've heard of these individuals. These are private individuals who either have a little or a lot of liquid capital. If they're a full-time angel, then they probably have a lot of liquid capital, unless they have a syndicate of people behind them, which is a group of people with money who trust the advice and guidance of this lead angel to invest and pull deals for them. But where do you find these people? Good question. I like to think about angel investors as the way I recruit employees. You should do investor recruiting. You can find these kind of peoples on, I'll put a link below, it's called eban.org. That's the European Business Angel Network.org. And it's got a list of all these different business angel networks in every city and country around Europe, actually. And they have the same in the US and in Asia, where you can find these individuals. Now, typically, when you raise an angel round of funding, bear in mind, you don't want to take on more than, I say the golden rule is 5 to 15 angel investors. And you want those 5 to 15 individuals to differ slightly. You don't want them to be the same people. What I mean by that is they both invest and also they can add value to you in terms of their network, who they know. And if you get 15 investors and they're all lawyers, then you're only exposed to one industry, right? Whereas if you get 15 investors and there are 2 lawyers, 2 accountants, 2 bankers, 2 industry expertise, 2 doctors, you name it, then you have a lot more network to tap into. And it's a great value to add later down the line, because you should always think about the pool of investors you put together should add some value to you at different points. They don't all have to add value right now, but at some later stage, you might need the IP lawyer to advise you on your patenting or whatever it might be. Or when you get to a VC round, you might want to call your banker angel and say, hey, can you help us structure the term sheet? What should we look at with valuation? So these people are there to help you as well as financially invest in you. All right, so the next phase of funding is early stage funds. Now, this is when you start to get really institutionalized investors looking at your company. This is fantastic because they usually invest large sums of money or larger sums than angels do. And usually they'll do that individually. So whereas you might get 10 angels investing 100,000 each, that's $1 million. One of these funds might invest $1 million to $5 million in your company. So it's only one person you have to talk to basically, or a group of them at least, from within that company. But an early stage fund then wants certain things. Now, these early stage funds will want to invest in your company, but they also come with baggage. It's positive baggage, but they want some extra requirements, don't they? They want to see preferential shares maybe. They want a board seat, voting rights in the company, which is all fair because they're adding a lot more money, hopefully a lot more advice and guidance than your previous investors have done. But bear in mind that it's very important at this phase to know and remember, especially when you're about to raise your early rounds of funding, that every single round of funding, next investor wants a few extra terms from the shareholder rights, right? And there's only a finite number of shareholder rights that you can give away. On a typical term sheet through the lifetime of a business, there's, 15 to 20 shareholder rights, the core ones that you can give away. There's a few extra ones that get thrown in at the end. So if you start giving away all your early investors, your family, friends, and fools, or your angels, 15 extra terms when there's only sort of 20 on the list, when your early stage funds and your VCs and private equity funds come in later, they're going to want more terms in the last round. They're going to say, hey, well, they got preferential shares. I want a liquidation preference. Don't worry, these are buzzwords I'll tell you about in later videos. But you better be careful about what you give away in the early phases. Be mindful of that because later down the line, people want more. Understandably, they're putting more. There's more at risk. But if you don't have much more to give, then you're the one who's going to pay the price at the end of the day. One last point on the early stage funds. You should do your due diligence in them, which is basically checking the skeletons in the closets, as much as they do it in you, because these people are basically coming into your company as co-owners with you, right? They have voting rights. They are now part of the pie. They're getting into the marriage, right? So be careful about who you bring in. Do your due diligence. One advice I always give to founders is something that they don't think of too often. I didn't think in the early days either. Is to ask the investor to give you references of other companies they've invested in. Because if you speak to other founders who they've invested in and they say, oh, they're great, they're amazing, so supportive, so helpful, then you know that's a good investment to make. Bring them in, give them a board seat. But if they say, oh yeah, we got the money and never heard from them, or we got the money and never didn't hear from them, they were just on our back all the time, those are investors you don't want to bring in. So bear in mind that just because you're the one who's asking and begging for the money doesn't mean that you're the one who has to give them everything and not ask them any questions. You can ask questions. It's your business they want to invest in. And ultimately, it's your business that's going to give them the return on their investments. So you're the one who gets to ask the questions. Bear that one in mind. Next one, and the last one I want to talk about, is venture capital, because venture capital is, of course, probably the most spoken and sexiest part of fundraising and the startup journey, right? It's the sexiest place because VCs are ex-founders, famous ex-founders, often raise funds. Atomico is an example of one that the founder of Skype set up and now has raised, billions of euros and then is investing in companies around Europe and internationally. VCs are amazing because VCs are known as rocket fuel. And what I mean by rocket fuel is they come with money under pressure to grow and grow. Which is a good thing and a bad thing because it can add a lot of extra pressure that you might not need because you're already under pressure. Bear in mind that VCs come and do a lot of due diligence. They often want a board seat, like early stage funds, but maybe in some cases they invest larger amounts of money, Series A, B, C. As the series go down the line, they're in order of alphabetical order. So Series A is anything from $1 million to $5 million. Series B, 5 to 20. Series C, 20 to 50. You name it, right? These VCs obviously then want lots of more requirements on the term sheets. They want 2 board seats maybe. They want to have some control of hiring a chairman. They want to have some control. And there are some negative cases where founders get pushed out of their own business because the VCs take control. Now, these are the negative ones that you hear about. This doesn't happen too often. VCs are all genuinely very good people. I used to be a VC, and I know many VCs, and they're great people. But when you're pitching to VCs, I've been one, do your work. Don't go to a VC that's investing in financial technology when you're an e-commerce company. Don't go to a VC when you're in healthcare and they're only investing in financial technology. Do your homework. Here's a few tips when you're looking to get money from VCs. Know who they are. Know their portfolio. If they raise $10 million or $100 million, they typically invest that over a 7-year period or 7 to 10-year period. It's called the investment time frame. And if you come to a fund that's 5-6 years into that 7-year investment time frame, odds are they probably don't have as much money as they had at the beginning to invest. They might have invested 70% of their money. Say it was $100 million, they've only got $30 million left to invest. And most VCs will save that last cash cushion to follow on the investments of the winning startups that they've invested in to protect their equity stake. So if you go to a VC fund that's just been raised, they're probably very hungry to make investments. It's a good time to go to them. So bear in mind where they are. Also, think about the time of the year. VCs do invest throughout the year, yes, but they also have their employees. They're salaried people, VCs. They have their own lives. They want to go on holiday in summer. They want to take Christmas off, right? So if you're going to go to a VC in December looking to raise money, you're going to have a delayed start to that fundraise because, of course, they're going to be trying to close investments off that year by the end of that year. They're going to be looking to start new ones in the January. So if you meet them in December, they're going to go, yeah, great, let's talk in January. Now, another point to remember is where are you in your fundraising and business growth journey? Because if you're in a period of momentum, if you've got good traction, so say your business is a cyclical business, you want to start fundraising, say it's a cyclical business closer to Christmas. You start fundraising at the end of summer because fundraising on average takes 4 to 6 months, depending on, especially with VCs, the due diligence timeframe. Because if you're a highly technical business, they're going to do technical due diligence. This can take time because you have to give them information. Still running your business, nothing stops. Everything continues to go. So if you are starting due diligence with the mind frame that you want to close by Christmas, you start, in August or something like that, going to these VCs, maybe even the month before that, and go, hey, this is who we are. You pitch to them, you get them excited, and you know that your business is going to start to grow in revenue or sales towards Christmas. It's a great strategy because you're just going to look sexy to them every time they come back. Every time you have a check-in and they do the due diligence, you're going to go, wow, the company's growing. It might even mean your valuation will increase. So bear that in mind when you're talking to VCs. And one big thing to remember about talking to VCs is VCs, for the most part, aren't rich. They may, in the long term, maybe actually make some money from the investments that they've made on behalf of other people. But VCs manage money on behalf of other people. I've invested $49 million. Do you know that? I personally invested $49 million. Well, I've been involved in my team that did that. I didn't have that money. We had $200 million that we were allowed to invest. It wasn't my money. So people would assume that maybe we were rich or I was successful. I was successful in different ways, I think, but not in terms of the financial sense. That wasn't my money to invest. So treat VCs like you would treat anyone. They aren't rich mostly, apart from the ones that are a bit older and been doing it for longer than 10 years. Some of them are rich. So that's VC money. That's VC raising. That is our last phase of the startup fundraising cycle. The next phase is our private equity and the exit phase when you IPO. I'm going to talk about that whole lecture in another one. I know that's a lot from this video. If you want to get weekly business insight, hit us up on the subscribe and you will never miss a video again. Thank you for watching this video. I'll see you in the next video.